Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of It's Cool with Jasmine Cool. Yes, that is in fact my real last name, spelled just like that, Cool. In this podcast, we'll talk about queer things, in particular, my experience with discovering I was queer growing up in a tiny Midwestern town. Music, lots of music. I'm a big music nerd. Just things happening in the world, mental health, and unfortunately there may be some mention of politics simply because I was raised by a history teacher, and so that's something that's important to me. It's in my life. I find it, important to be educated on what's going on in the country. I live in the United States, especially important there because it's a bit ridiculous right now. But I decided to start this podcast because I talk to myself all the time, really out loud. Not just like mumbling, not like in my head, like out loud. And I figured it'd be a little less weird if I'm pretending I'm talking to somebody else. I guess I'm not pretending if anybody hears this, but who knows? A little bit about me. My pronouns are she, her. I am not straight. I've been through a lot of labels fairly recently. I started my sexuality journey like 3 years ago, maybe a little less. Actually, it feels like it's been so much longer, but in reality it hasn't even been that long. But I went through like bisexual, pansexual. I'm thinking queer right now, but that word has like so many meanings that it can be kind of hard to distinguish. And I'm not genderqueer, which is a very different thing, which we may talk about later, because I'm not genderqueer yet. Who knows where that may go, but, right now, I am just not straight. Let's see. I grew up in a teeny tiny Midwestern town that is extremely Catholic, extremely conservative, very Republican. I kind of hate it. And when I say small town, I don't mean like 5,000 people, 10,000 people. Like, I've heard people describe that as a small town, and it baffles me because my town, according to the sign that hasn't been updated in forever, has 842 people. Less than 1,000. Now, this is the town I live in. I went to school in the one little school in that town from 4K all the way through middle school to 8th grade. And then I transferred to a different small town school for high school. It's actually the school that my dad teaches at. But that will be it's a very long, complicated story. I have 3 siblings. I have an older brother who's about 4 years older than me, who graduated early from college with a degree in political science and classics and a couple of other things, like as like minors and stuff. He was going to be a lawyer until he found out lawyers are assholes. And he is now selling fancy shoes while he figures out what he actually wants to do. I have a younger brother. I like to say he's 2 years younger than me. He really likes to push the 1.5. He wants to be an audio engineer eventually. And my little sister, Juliana, is like about 3 or 4 years younger than me. And she is skipping her sophomore year of high school, so she's going to be a junior this year, which is really weird. I have 2 cats, Peanut Butter and Peter, and a dog named Brandy. but spelled with an I instead of a Y, so it doesn't seem like we named her after the alcohol, even though we definitely did, because that's the color she is. I just graduated from high school, and I will be going to college very soon to major in vocal performance and something else. Right now, at the moment, I'm leaning towards linguistics, which to a lot of people who know me would be really funny because I cannot hold a conversation to save my life. um, but I find that stuff very interesting. So I'm very excited, but I'm also very nervous, as everybody is, because it's college, it's a new experience, whatever. But it's gonna be fun. It'll be interesting. I'm really hoping I'm gonna be able to make some good, lasting friendships there. But it's gonna be difficult. That's something I've struggled with because a lot of my kind of trauma revolves around the friends that I had in middle school and even some into high school, and the struggles of like trying to fit in a small town because you don't have a lot of options. Let me tell you that. It's not always fun. I used to be a 3-sport athlete. I used to play basketball, volleyball, and softball. I've been playing softball the longest. I played from about as soon as I could walk to my junior year of high school, and then my senior year, okay, here's the thing. I'm not particularly great at sports. I'm not bad, but I'm nothing special. And I knew I was going to be a senior on JV, and I just was not really down for that. But yeah, my dad is a baseball coach, so I'd been playing since I was really little, and I still like to play every now and then, but it's hard when you're not actually on a team. And then basketball was my second sport. I started that in 3rd grade, played all the way to freshman in high school, and volleyball I played from middle school to freshman in high school. So after freshman year, I dropped volleyball and basketball because volleyball season just did not go well. And basketball overlapped way too much with musical season because that was my big thing. I'm a musician, so that was my whole thing. And I don't know if you've never played basketball before, it's exhausting. Okay, so we would have 2-hour practices of running back and forth, and then I would have to go to a 4-hour hell week rehearsal for my musical, and it was just too much. I remember the first night I got in the shower when I got home finally at 11:30 because I lived half an hour away from where I went to school, and I just cried. I was like, I can't do this. So then I eventually dropped that and picked up what may be the most unexpected thing of all of this: football cheerleading. And I did that sophomore, junior, and senior year of high school. Varsity football cheerleading. Yes, ma'am. Now, don't forget about every notion of cheerleaders that you have in your head, because the cheerleaders at my school were not the popular kids. Our cheer team was it was like a dance team, but our dances were really easy. And we had to be really careful because we would get bullied by the student section sometimes. Ooh, I can tell you some stories about that. But it was basically just another way for me to dance, which fits in fairly well, I guess, with theater and being a musician. I play the bass clarinet, the guitar. Well, saying I play the guitar is stretching it a little bit. I'm trying to learn. I'm teaching myself. Piano, not classically trained, but I can accompany myself. That's the kind of piano I can play. Nothing too complicated. I play tenor saxophone. I learned that when I transferred to high school because at my middle school for marching and pep band and stuff, I would just play the bass clarinet, but I would read tenor saxophone music. That is not fun. I don't recommend because it's just weird. But then I learned tenor saxophone at my new school, which sounds like it would be complicated, but it's fairly simple. In theory, that means I can play every saxophone and every clarinet because all the fingerings are the same. I've tried learning flute twice, but it's never really stuck. But I do plan to hopefully eventually maybe learn flute. Who knows? My sophomore year of high school, I also became the drum major of the marching band, which is really fun. I really like doing that. And because my school was still super tiny, even though it was bigger than the one I went to for middle school, it still only had 250 kids in the whole high school. So being drum major, I didn't have a baton. I didn't do anything super fancy. I was basically just conducting, and I had a whistle. And I didn't even get to wear the uniforms because I was a cheerleader, so I just wore my cheer uniform. But it was really fun, and that was something I enjoyed quite a lot. I crochet. I've dabbled in a little embroidery. I really love reading. I used to read so many books a lot, and now I read fan fiction, which is a little embarrassing, but I'm working on being less embarrassed about it because it's not really something to be embarrassed about. But it feels like it. It feels like it, but it's not, and I'm working on that. But I've started a record collection, vinyl records. I've started that fairly recently. I have almost all of the ABBA ones, and I'm very excited. It's actually not ABBA, it's ABBA, and I hate that because I've said ABBA my whole life, and then I eventually searched the web for a video of Benny Anderson saying it, and they say ABBA. And it felt like my soul died when I found that out. It was very sad. A very intimate detail that will maybe, hopefully, be updated in my college experience. I have not had even my first kiss yet. My rice purity score is 97. 98, 97. Broski, it's very sad. Very sad. Lots of queer longing, but there's no queer people here. It's sad. And I've really struggled with compulsive heterosexuality, and it's a trend I've noticed only recently that every boy I've ever had a crush on is me. They're me. Particularly the one that I actually felt like I had the biggest crush on. Literally looked like we could be siblings. We both have brown curly hair, both have bright blue eyes, both are not skinny, but also not wouldn't be really chubby or overweight. He started lifting and he's massive now, but strong body types, kind of scary. We were both really smart, did a lot of the same things. And the more I think back, the scarier it gets. Because, when you find out you're not straight and you look back, and this is something so many queer people can relate to, it's like the signs were there and you're just an idiot. Except for me it's so weird because my mother is major nerd, but also not, because she grew up with 7 siblings, 4 or 5 of which were brothers. So she grew up as very much a tomboy. She was the manager of the football team and could definitely play football if she wanted to, but that, like, she grew up in, like, she was in high school in, like, the 80s, so that, like, wasn't really a thing. She also grew up in a small town, not near here, but a different small town. And my dad was major jock city boy. Like, it's very stereotypical. They are still together. I know it's weird. Don't mention it. It's fine. I still have plenty of trauma to discuss. It's just different trauma. But yeah, so I grew up in this weird in-between of having both of those sides, because in small towns, to be popular, you have to be good at sports. And because my dad was a jock, I did grow up playing sports, but because my mother was a nerd, and my dad is also pretty nerdy. He's just like a history nerd, which is very nerdy. I grew up also doing nerdy things. So I was never actually good at sports, but I was like, but I wasn't, I guess, nerdy enough to fit in with, like, the kids in the small town who were not the sports kids. So I had to, like, decide, and then because I was on the sports teams, I made myself kind of fit in with the sports people, which didn't really work when I went to high school, because the sports there were on a whole other level, because the school was slightly bigger and they were, like, just better at sports. So it didn't really work for me anymore. And I also had more opportunities of those in-between people who weren't necessarily, like, super, like the weird kids, I guess you would say. They were in between, like me. They did music. They really liked music. They were in all the musicals. The musical was a thing. That was not a thing at my old school. It's really sad. But it was a really nice. It was nice to find people who I could be more of myself around, because when I transferred schools, I actually realized how much of myself I was faking and was not actually me at all, which is sad, but I feel like that's something a lot of people go through. And you know, even in my, like, mental health journey, trying to figure out the various mental illnesses I may have, part of that has been through, like, TikTok, and TikTok will tell you you have pretty much anything. But, just in my research or whatever, it almost sounds like masking, where I would, like, suppress what I actually liked, or certain behaviors that I would do. And even now I'll notice myself, like, I hate eye contact in general, but I will force myself to have eye contact in a conversation because that's what people expect, which is weird, and I don't quite understand it. But I don't think I have anything like autism or ADHD or anything, but I do have anxiety, and it's not, like, professionally diagnosed, but I am working on making sure I keep telling myself that and saying it out loud that I have anxiety, because I spent so much of my, like, trying to decide if I did or not, telling myself that I was exaggerating, being like, oh, everybody gets nervous. And then it would get to the point where I'm just, like, laying in bed, scrolling on my phone, being miserable because I can't force myself to do anything, because it just felt like anything I would lay there scrolling, but thinking about all of the things that I had to do instead of actually doing any of them. But I didn't want to sit there scrolling, but I just couldn't stop. And I didn't, So while I may not have like ADHD or anything, there's certain aspects of it that I think my anxiety manifests itself as. And if anybody ever meets me in person and I don't talk a lot, which may be the case because my anxiety combined with my trauma from my like middle school friendships makes me silent in social situations involving my peers because I'm so terrified that anything I say that is remotely myself, they're gonna judge me and hate me for it, even though I that's not true. But that's what I've been told pretty much all my life by people who are supposed to be my friends. And so I tend to freeze up and just not say anything, which makes me come off as stuck up or rude or like I think I'm better than everybody, which is that's not how I want to come across, because I don't think that, and I'm just nervous, okay? I'm just scared of you. That's the problem, is I think you're better than me and your opinion is really important to me, even though it really shouldn't be, because I don't know you, but it is. So I'm just scared of you, okay? I promise. And actually, an interview or like this question thing that Omar Rudberg from the Young Royals Netflix series did, he said that like the biggest misconception about him is that he comes off as rude, but he's just shy. And when I like, it almost made me cry because I was like, that is the most relatable thing somebody's ever said, because it causes so many problems for me, because so many people who I've met and have later become like my close friends have told me that they thought I was stuck up when they met me. And I hate that. I hate that about myself, that I can come off that way. And it's something I'm really trying to work on, but it's something I don't really know how to fix either, which, not a great combination. But yeah, speaking of friends, I guess I do plan to have some guests on here to like tell stories or talk about certain topics. My first guest will probably be my little sister, because that's something she really wants to do. It'll be interesting because I only have one mic. Maybe I'll have to somehow convince my little brother to let me use his. I just recently bought myself a condenser mic, and I'm very happy because I've been working this summer at an industrial job. Sometimes I feel like a woman in STEM, because one day I walked in to work and I was the only girl doing my job. Like there's like a couple other girls that do the same job as me, but it's like mostly guys, and I didn't even realize until that day. And then I was like, oh my god, there's so much testosterone in this vicinity. It's like crazy, but it makes me money. It's made me enough money to pay for my college this year and to buy me some nice stuff. So I'm worried that I'm gonna go to school and they're gonna think I'm rich or something, when really I've just been working so hard this summer. And my job, I call it semi-physical labor because it's not difficult work, but my back is feeling it. I told my mom I was gonna need 3 chiropractor appointments before I go to school because it's getting a little painful. But I get to listen to music all day, which is fun, and other podcasts, even though I'm not really a big podcast person, which is really funny because I'm making a podcast. But I get to listen to music all day, which is really nice. Recently I was listening to Candide by Leonard Bernstein, and that thing is nuts. It is nuts. All great composers have to be some level of insane, because parts of that are like so beautiful and moving just in like melody wise without even like considering lyrics, and other parts of it are just crazy. If you want an example, I would listen to the song Auto da Fe. Insane, okay? But I love Leonard Bernstein because the good parts in there, oh my god, they're amazing. So incredible. Definitely give that a listen. But that's like the only highlight of my capitalism job. It makes me enough money to buy myself a microphone. But I worked really hard for it, and I've been pretty proud of myself because the school I'm going to is pretty expensive. Okay, it's really expensive because it's a private school. It's a private, like, conservatory. But I worked my butt off for scholarships, okay? Like, I got myself like a merit scholarship, and then I worked hard to apply for outside ones, and then I spent like every day this summer working at this job for capitalism, but at least it's not for Amazon. It could be worse. It could be much worse. But I'm going to, I guess, kind of close up a little bit here. A segment that I kind of want to close everything with, each episode with, every time, is what my favorite song is right now. And I mentioned listening to Candide, but this song actually isn't gonna come from there. It's one of my favorites of all time. It's a little obscure, and of course somebody's gonna find it and be like, well, I don't know. But it's called Flyweight Love by Vienna Teng, and it just makes me so happy. It's like my go-to whenever I'm feeling particularly sad or anxious, or like I really don't want to do anything. The verse is actually in 7/8, and all my musicians will know what that means, but it's like a weird time signature, so it like catches you a little off guard, but I love it so much. And just all of the harmonies in there, it's wonderful. Hopefully it will make your day better if you're having a bad day. But that is my favorite song right now. You can check out my music Instagram. There's not much on there right now. It's Jasmine Cool Music. I do plan to upload more there eventually at some point, because that is kind of what will hopefully be my career eventually. And I also have TikTok, jazzycool_. That's not really related to anything music, but you might find something funny on there that you enjoy. But yeah, I hope you found this somewhat entertaining. And even if only 4 people hear this from now, and if they are my family, well, congratulations. You found it before it was popular. Who knows if this is gonna get popular. But thank you all so much for listening, even if it's just the 4 of you.